Last Black Man in San Francisco is a 2019 drama, great film, but put out by A24 Studios, high quality stuff all around here. The movie is artistic, poetic, haunting. It's about so many real world subjects, but it's still dreamy enough to be sort of alluring to us romantics who, like some kind of stylized tincture to pretty much everything we see. That may be a flaw in the movie. I mean, it's about realistic topics like gentrification, black people in San Francisco, murders in San Francisco, crime, etc. It's about transit, tourism, how houses are unaffordable, how San Francisco has, very rich people and very poor people, but sort of middle class bourgeois types are, not allowed anymore or can't live there anymore. It has nasty real estate moguls and so on. So this could have been one of those neo-realistic films, which is hard-edged, edgy, has natural actors or non-professional actors. But this movie is instead very stylized, so you have to take that choice for what it is. The story is based on Jimmy Falls' own life to some extent. The main character in this movie, who lives with his best friend, played by Jonathan Majors, an artistic guy named Mont Allen, and he works at a nursing home taking care of older people. But he wants to live in a house that he lived in when he was a boy. His father lived in the house, his mother, and then his grandfather, he says, built the house in 1946. A classic Victorian-looking house in San Francisco, which is now worth $4 million. At present, or at least at the beginning of the movie, he's going over there and fixing it up. The older white couple who are in the house, they don't take care of the house as well as Jimmy would like, and so he's going over there and painting, putting flowers, tending the garden. When that couple leaves the house, they leave it behind, he decides, hey, I'm going to go squat in the house. And guess what? His family has a history of squatting. Once his father was either kicked out or left the house in the 1990s, he and Jimmy, and you have to pick this up through dialogue. It takes maybe a couple viewings to hear this, once squatted in a warehouse. Jimmy lived in a group home. They lived in a car for a while. So Jimmy is used to doing the squatting thing. But when he goes into the house, it's a wonderful movie house. He takes ardent and serious care of it. His friend Mont helps him out with this, moves in with him too a little bit. They even bring in a member of a street gang or a local group of black men hanging out at a curb. One of them comes in and becomes their friend in a way. But the tension in this movie is always, okay, Jimmy's squatting. When is he going to get kicked out of this house? And, that's a plot problem that will come up later in the film. As you watch Jimmy develop the house, you also see parts and bits of his background. His father, who lives in a low-income housing and is pirating DVDs. He meets his mother on a bus in an amazing, one of my favorite scenes from this movie, or basically any movie from the last 10 years. He meets his mother, who he hasn't seen since he was a kid, since he was smaller than her, as she says. Wonderfully shot moment. Jimmy has had a rough life, as we know. Now he's staying with his new best friend, or his recent best friend, Mont. Mont has a grandfather who is blind, played by Danny Glover. It's kind of a nice threesome trio in this house. It's cozy, but yet Jimmy has bigger dreams of making this house his own. Now, the title gives away a lot of ideas in this movie, and I think it has a faint hint of apocalypticism. The Last Black Man, kind of related to something like the Omega Man, which I think was set in San Francisco, Last Man on Earth. But it has a realistic aspect. Last Black Man in San Francisco means, the black population is in decline. Early in this movie, we're told it was once the Harlem of the West, and that's given Jimmy's grandfather's story of perhaps building this house. We know this to be possible, and yet the black people have either left or the neighborhood's been gentrified, or both. And so the issue of gentrification and the affordability of housing and just even income streams in general and living in the city, that is a major aspect of this film. Jimmy has this dream of restoring, but can he do it? And since this movie has San Francisco in its title, one of the classic American movies to film, a beautiful city to film, in spite of all of its really horrible problems, or possible problems if you read the news about it. The city is beautiful looking, certainly this house is, and Jimmy has this dream of, restoring things in a city that he loves. So in a way, this movie is about, I think, conservatism and conservation of a local place. He's going to take this house and restore it. He's going to restore the black neighborhood, as it were. Not just he himself is moving in the house, but maybe it can be a de-gentrification of this neighborhood. So some things to note while you're watching this movie. There's a tension between Jimmy taking public transit, which has a number of problems, versus doing it himself and skateboarding around the city. When he skateboards around, there's a sort of a travelogue of San Francisco, as in so many classic San Francisco movies, from Vertigo all the way to Rise of the Planet of the Apes, so many San Francisco-esque movies. This movie is in lockstep with those. It's making reference to all those, and classic San Francisco fare, especially boomer music by Janis Joplin, Jefferson Airplane. If You're Going to San Francisco is sung in a very wonderful way. And so there's a lot of allusions to classic pop culture idealism of San Francisco, but then we get more of the realism of it in this movie and the sort of contrast between those two. Another element is that Jimmy and Mont are both more artsy guys and they're caretakers versus the street gang, who I guess they're artsy in their own way, but Jimmy and Mont are pigeonholed as intellectuals and, kind of kicked out of the gang, made fun of. But there's a tension between, are they really separate or is there overlap? And when you hear the backstory, Jimmy knew Kofi, one of the guys in this gang, and they've had a long-standing relationship. That leads up to Jimmy, one of the great lines of this movie. Near the end of the movie, I won't spoil it, but Jimmy says,
"People aren't one thing."
And that's what this movie is really about, is the irreducibility, the inherent complexity of Jimmy himself as a person, of any individual in this movie, of the house itself, and of the city itself. You can't reduce the city down to a shithole because there's a lot of shit on the ground, as you can look at the San Francisco poop maps. You can't reduce it down to being a billionaire's club. There's a lot of exquisite complexity in this place, as in a person, and that's what Jimmy wants this house to be. And so I absolutely love that line for that reason.
If you're going to San Francisco, be sure to wear flowers in your hair.
The musical choices in this movie are really interesting. I think you could criticize them. They're NPR-like. It's like listening to National Public Radio and hearing a lot of music from there. But it's deliberately artistic in a more of a slightly high culture way, which I kind of like, as a tension between that and the lower class, lower income aspects of this movie. The music is haunting, it's beautiful throughout the entire movie, and it has fascinating references, and historical references in particular, to San Francisco and some of the themes and ideas of the movie. Now I'm going to spoil this movie a little bit, just so you know. I love the last 10 to 15 minutes of this movie. It always has made me feel a certain complexity of emotions. And it starts in a way with Jimmy talking to two women on a bus, and the women are outsiders, and they've come into San Francisco and they're dissing it. They're making fun of it. They're saying it's awful. Jimmy's, by contrast, on the bus, you have the 180-degree flips here, and he's saying, you have to love San Francisco before you hate it.
Do you love it?
I'm here, but do I have to love it?
You don't get to hate it unless you love it.
Which is really, in a way, a true conservative, classical conservative kind of statement. You've got to know a place, understand it, breathe in it, live in it, adore it, in order to, really criticize it. Outsiders can't have the same perspective as insiders. That's a theme that comes up throughout the movie. There are at least two other scenes where local residents, Jimmy himself, are contrasted with tourists. And the tourists are either goofy, gooberish, or they're outlandish, stupid partiers. A great scene in the middle of the movie where Jimmy's sitting next to a naked old man on a bus stop, and the two of them are likened to, the insiders. This is who San Francisco is, compared to tourists maybe on a cable car, which San Francisco is known for, but it's been converted into a bus. And it's a wonderful sort of contrast between insiders and outsiders. The thing that comes up with the house itself is that Jimmy's an insider. He used to live there, versus outsiders who are moving in and changing the house or making it worse. And so, again, to me, Jimmy is kind of a conservationist, in this movie is adoring that sort of sensibility or ethos. The end of the movie, then, the haunting stuff. Jimmy leaves Mont, his good friend, his best friend, behind. He just leaves him a note and kind of ditches him. I don't like that, but it's a pattern of behavior in Jimmy's life, with his mother leaving him, for example, or Jimmy being abandoned at times during his life. The end of this movie then shows Mont lonely on a pier. Horrible, haunting, wonderful, beautiful shots, in my opinion. But then Jimmy rowing out of San Francisco Bay. There's nothing in the boat. What do these shots mean? I want to suggest to you that these are more poetic images. They may not be literal. I mean, you could take them literally, but if you did, then Jimmy would have kind of committed suicide, maybe. He'd be in literal danger of the ocean. He's going through Golden Gate Bridge. It's sort of a gateway to the city. It's the first time in the movie, the Golden Gate Bridge, the classical tourist attraction, the thing that San Francisco is known for, is mentioned in the movie. But him rowing through the gates is maybe symbolic. And then he's on ocean, or on waves, the unstable ground, as it were, the constant dynamic movement, versus the home that he wants to plant himself in and live in, a firm footing, as it were. But the boat is symbolic of Jimmy moving on, becoming an exile, an outsider somewhere else. I actually don't take the ending of this literally, like he's literally rowing out on the waves, although he could be. And so play around with that idea and see what you think about it. All in all, this movie gets better on multiple viewings to me. Knowing it, understanding it, it's kind of like the house itself. The more you inhabit it, the more you get it, the more you love it, the more you want to look around and see other things you haven't seen before. And isn't that what a good movie's for? I think this is a very good movie. What do you think of The Last Black Man in San Francisco? Let us know in the comments. Please subscribe to this channel for more great content. Thank you. Have a great day.